And again, for people just coming back, if there's anyone that wants to provide public comment, please come up and sign the sign-in sheet.
Does anybody still needs a copy of the report? We have plenty of them here now.
Plenty of extra copies. Can I get a motion from the board to resume the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, folks, we're back in session. If you spoke before distribution, I will get back to you and recall you, but I'm going to resume where we were on the list. Matt Zarell.
I'm going to go over here so I can see everybody. Works for me.
I've done this much before, forgive me. Matt Zarell, 299 Brook Street in Bristol. I'm an old townie. My grandpa Fred started the union with another guy in a new departure back in '48. He was on the Housing Authority, and Dad and I used to work on voting machines. And I really haven't been politically active, but I've been kind of watching this in the background because there's a lot of editorials in the press on it, and it's a little bit confusing to me, but in the casual reading I've done, a couple of things kind of concern me, and as an old townie that intends to, quite frankly, pack it in here someday. I mean, it's a little bit around. This is my town. It always has been. And a lot of you in the room are the same way, whatever side of the fence or interest you come from. I'm very grateful to the board for getting this out in the open. I think that was a great first step, and I hope that we can have another Q&A session after everybody digests it. But some of the comments that I read in the press they come from a lot of people in town that I think have an impression of a very simple, however educated they are, a simple financing system from the old days where developer comes in, you get your financing, and here's an example of one of the editorials comments was people want a Whole Food store, you know, there's always been a grocery store there. Whether or not that would be the right thing to do, I think a lot of residents in the town have the perception that the whole umbrella of the way the money's going to flow in this thing is that simple. And most of us in this room know it's not. And I don't really have anything good or bad to say about Renaissance, but I can tell you for a fact that if you subscribe to the map and the plan, from everything I know about it, and it falls under the umbrella of the CCRPA implementation, we're going to lose control of our town, simply speaking. And for brevity's sake, I think a lot of you realize that deep down inside. When you have to be beholden to a whole set of sustainable growth objectives outlined and buried in 8 pages of the state budget, trickled down through the agencies and various organizations to the point where, well, you can't really build your grocery store because you have to have 3 stories of residential in a mall, and it has to conform to the map, and unless I'm mistaken, God forbid it's outside the map, and then when the tax incremental financing, which is proposed in here, comes through, what percentage of the town's interests are beholden to that tax incremental financing? A larger portion than this little patch of downtown. So things like this kind of confuse me. Again, I'm new at it, but I know a lot of this kind of, I think more time should be allotted to explore and to educate the whole population in Bristol. And again, I applaud you for getting this out from behind the flag, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrea Adams?
Andrea Adams, 67 Bayberry Drive, Bristol, Connecticut. Thank you for allowing the public to speak. I'm actually here to speak in favor of the project. When Renaissance Downtowns came to town, I thought it was very interesting that they actually reached out to the public to say, you know what, we want to get you involved. We want to know what you want in your downtown. They want to know what I want. They want to know what kind of stores I want. They want to know what I'd like to see downtown. So they engaged us. They reached out to us. We've had meetings. We've actually done a lot of legwork ourselves. They didn't do it. We did it. We reached out to other people, got people involved, part of the whole process. We had ideas were regenerated. We researched those ideas. That's where the piazza came up. We're going to have the only piazza in the whole United States, okay, that is a true piazza. That's going to be in Bristol, Connecticut. We need a town that's going to have vision. I understand there's numbers here, and I don't understand a lot of it. I just know that if we don't make this town a destination, people are going to continue to leave. Basically, where I go is, if it's not to Barley Vine, Firefly, the Artistry Tea House, which are all products of Bristol Rising and the whole process to Renaissance, I'm out of town. Where did I go last night? We went to Manchester, okay? Main Street. Southington. These are where I go with my friends. These are people who work at Bristol Hospital with me that live out of town, okay? And we go to their main streets. We go to their downtown, and we walk around, and we shop, and we socialize. That's what I want over here. All I know is these guys have put $2 million of their own money in, okay, without anything happening. They haven't gotten anything back yet. That's $2 million of their own money. They've engaged the public. I think that they've been pretty transparent, at least whenever I've gone to ask questions, they've answered what they could. Certainly not all questions can be answered right away, because you have to do some things behind closed doors. If you go to see any of the other contractors in town, they're not going to come up and give you answers right away. But to be honest with you, I don't need this to be another cookie-cutter town with another CVS, another Dunkin' Donuts, another Walgreens, okay, a Walmart grocery store. There's nothing that's different about this town except Dos Amigos, Barley Vine, Artistry's Tea Shop, Tea House, Firefly. If you go to these businesses right now, they are actually bringing people in town. People are excited. The hospital's had many events at Barley Vine alone, okay, bringing people from all over the state. They can't believe what a gem we have. So please, when you consider this plan, just don't look at the money and say, you know what, this is it, we're walking, and have a developer that actually came to us and said, you know what, I want to help you guys and I want to build a great downtown. You know, make this a destination. Please don't, again, make this another cookie-cutter town where all you have are little franchise places where no one's going to stay. They're going to leave to go out of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Roos? Did I say that right?
Ruest.
Ruest?
That's fine. I'm not offended. I don't know if everybody here is aware, but this plan is not born from Renaissance downtowns. This is transit-oriented development. This has begun in this state since 2005, right about the time when the mall got knocked down. And basically, state law now dictates that you must concentrate development along transit lines. All the capital project funding that's coming from the state right now is for transit-oriented development. So if somebody's worried about having a cookie-cutter town, this is the recipe for it. This is actually a nationwide recipe for a cookie-cutter town for this kind of thing. We can have our own downtown and promote downtown and do it without the help of the state and without the federal government to do it. And if you have any doubts about the transit-oriented development, please visit my blog site where I've actually outlined in detail everything of where this has come from. This is the reason why we have a developer from Long Island here in Connecticut, because since in 2010, the tri-state region received more sustainable community planning grants than any other area of the whole United States. But when the federal funding dried up, the state tried to pick up the slack. They're going to do that with debt, okay? Right now, the state of Connecticut is $65 billion in debt. There's $25 billion in unfunded liabilities and $19 billion of bonded debt. We're using bonded debt for transit-oriented development in this state. If you go to Governor Malloy's website, you'll see that, and you can go to the OPM website, you'll see that all this is being funded on the backs of our children and our grandchildren. All right, if you want to include tax incremental financing on the local level, then you're amplifying that. I'm sure that everyone here on the board knows how tax incremental financing works, but for everyone else who doesn't, the interest rates escalate further in time. You're relying on income that is not guaranteed. All right? The state has been designated as a zombie economy state because we are #2 in the whole nation for unfunded liabilities. This means that we are more willing to take risks to recoup those unfunded liabilities. The state wants to impose that on you, the municipality. by deferring the debt for the infrastructure, this is their recipe for economic growth, is to get people out of automobiles so that they have an extra $10,000 a year to spend in the economy. If any of you think that this is a great idea, I urge you to say, would you want to live in this development without an automobile? Would you want your children to live in this without an automobile? Maybe you should ask them, would you like to pay to live in a community without an automobile? Because this, in its core, is sustainable development. It's not a grassroots organization. The developer brought a grassroots organization into Bristol. We can do that on our own. We don't need to be bonded into debt and enslaved into debt. I'm glad that everybody agreed, including the developer, to release the details of the funding. It doesn't have everything in here that I was looking for, but I want you to keep in mind, here in the state of Connecticut, according to the Constitution, we have a social compact. We're all equal in rights. No man or set of men are entitled to exclusive public emoluments or privileges within the community, and all political power is inherent to the people. So if the people of Bristol don't have all the details on this, and trust me, they don't, because I've been knocking on people's doors, they think we're building shopping down here. This is 94%, I'm sorry, it's now 97% housing over here. Where are these people going to work? You need to think about that before you move this forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And for purposes of the record, during the break, Mr. Ruiz distributed to the board members a written piece of paper that I believe comes from his blog. Noel, if you'll put this in the record. Thank you. Frank Kramer? Frank Kramer?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Brief. You know, other than the rental income for the space leased to Renaissance downtowns, question, has the city of Bristol received any money from Renaissance in consideration for the development rights to what was then called Depot Square?
Well, to date we have not. We have the PDA that specifies there'll be a payment to the land when the closing occurs.
Okay, but up till now, other than the lease money for the occupancy of downtown, no money has changed hands as of yet.
No.
Okay. According to the contract, and you know, I'm not a lawyer, so wading through this is a bit difficult for me. But was it specified that it would be only private equity that would fund Depot Square? I mean, that seems to be an important glaring component of this whole project. So I think it's a simple question. Was private equity the only means of financing Depot Square, or was there a public finance option?
The terms of the contract specify that the developer would come in to the board in the city with a financing, development, and leasing plan. The details of that I do not believe are specified in the PDA.
I think in section 4.03 of the PDA.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would think that this would jump out at all you guys on the BDDC, being that it's either a mixture of private and public funding, strictly public, or strictly private.
Your question is rather general. You're saying for the development of Depot Square. The intent from the beginning has been that the development would take place using private developer dollars. But we've also recognized from the beginning that there might be some need for either local or state funding to provide things like infrastructure. And if money was available from the state to build a structured parking facility, that's something we would consider. But before we got into those specific individual pieces of the project, we needed to have an overall development plan, which has been submitted. But the construction of the components of Depot Square, I would say, were originally intended to be done with private dollars.
Okay, originally intended. But what does the contract actually say? I'm sure it doesn't say urgently ascending.
The contract simply says that a financing, leasing, and development plan will be presented by the developer, showing sources of funding sufficient to cover all applicable project costs for such portion of the project as the parties may agree to be developed in phases. That's what the contract says.
Okay, so there's no stipulation whether it be public,
No,
private, or hybrid?
not in the CDA.
I mean, from the BDDC's point of view, was the essence of the agreement deemed to be private equity, private funding? I mean, did you guys get a sense of it, those who remain on the BDDC, or are still here?
They just answered for me.
I think we always felt that it would be a potential for mixed financing, as Frank said. There's going to be some public development, and there's going to be some private development.
Well,
And as you read the material that you were given tonight, this is a very difficult project. And when Renaissance took it on, they knew it was a difficult project. And they are in the process of trying to find financing as the basis of that we can use to go ahead. And the proposals that they're looking at is for some private and some public. It's very difficult to get, if you read the report that you got tonight from Renaissance, you'll see what a difficult project this is because of the area, because of the town, because of the demographics, and we have to deal with that as we develop, and as they develop, a financing plan to build the kind of downtown we want.
it positively is a complicated affair. I'm just wondering if you guys were aware of that at the onset, or did you feel that Renaissance really had it in hand?
No, we were absolutely aware that there would be some public participation in it.
No. My question was, really, did you feel it was going to be a complicated affair with a lot of moving parts, as this gentleman suggested, or did you feel it was going to be a simple, basic 1, 2, 3 deal?
With all due respect, sir, I think we're getting pretty far afield. What the board may or may not have felt at the inception of the relationship is not really, hold on, let me finish, is not really what's at issue here. What's at issue here is that they have a preferred developer agreement. There are obligations that the BDDC and the city parties have to Renaissance, and there are obligations that Renaissance has to the BDDC and the city parties. And really, this is now an issue of whether or not there's been compliance with the contract, not what anyone may have felt at the outset, not what they may feel sitting here today, but whether or not the people are fulfilling, the parties, I should say, the entities are fulfilling their contractual obligations to each other.
Well, I'm just curious because I think a lot of people are also curious as what engendered this to begin with. Aside from that, do you, have a belief that it's okay to, socialize the risk and privatize the profits, because that's ultimately what this is going to turn out to be, if we're that lucky.
Again, I think I'm referring to the...
I'll leave the question.
I don't think that's an appropriate question for the stage. Sir, before you leave, if I could just ask...
Sure.
We do ask people to identify their name and their address.
Yeah,
We didn't get a chance because you jumped right into the comment.
Yeah, Frank Kramer, Bristol, 40 Crescent Drive.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
It happens to me every time.
I'm Rochelle Levins from 88 Old Turnpike Road, Bristol. And my huge concern is, what are we going to do with all those apartments when you already know that, I think it's on Laurel Street, they haven't even been able to fill those. We're going to have hardly any retail space, but we're just building a downtown with apartments. And if anybody else was at the very first meeting that Mayor Ward was at, and many of you were at, at Eastern High School. Mr. Monty, I specifically asked you at that meeting if any public money was going to be used for this project, and you looked me straight in the face and said no, which meant we would have no low-income housing there. So what is this going to do to us? And I'm sure you remember that, without a doubt. I certainly remember it. And that's not fair to us, because here we sat for 4 years when we were told that you would not do that. We put our faith in you, some of us put our faith in you, until all we started to see was 700 apartments, then it's climbing, it's climbing, it's climbing. And what's the last number you have now for us? What's going to happen to our schools? What's going to happen to the infrastructure? What's going to happen to the roads coming into Bristol? This is going to break our backs. I mean, there comes a time that we need honesty. And you people, we're putting our faith in you. And we hope you don't let us down and let this happen to our beautiful community. It's just not fair to us. Many of us have spent our lives here, raised our families here, and it's not what we want. We want a downtown like this lady was saying. Of course we want nice things, but do we want apartments? No. We don't even have a fair ratio of apartments to, to retail. There's hardly any retail. We've got the size of a Walmart going in for retail space. And then you're talking about we're going to have to build parking garages for these? I'm sorry, but it's not what I want for this town that I've spent my life in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs, we're back to you.
Having done a lot of reading on downtowns and development, I basically agree with Mr. Monte and Renaissance that you need people to have a successful downtown. But the question is, who are these people going to be? Low-income housing, as was mentioned, that scares a lot of people. Andy talked about businesses, yeah, but there's no real retail for the rest of the people, from clothing, shoes, jewelry stores, and the like in the downtown area. That concerns an awful lot of people also. Going through this report, I couldn't find answers to my questions. Other than I saw one thing where Bristol can be expected to put up $6 million. I don't know whether that will fly. That's a legitimate question. I will say this much. We all want a better Bristol. Part of it is downtown. But I will say this tonight was a poor way to get the public involved, informed, and get their support, and promote and have confidence in the governmental process. To have a meeting like this, people weren't prepared, get the report. Who can go through it that quickly? Isn't the right way to run a railroad. I would ask that you have another meeting in a week or two where people can be better prepared to ask legitimate questions and put positive comments as well as questions on the table. Thank you.
I think your comments are well pointed, except for the fact that you know better than I that we've been at this for 4 years. We didn't start this last week. And the first thing that we did was to have public information sessions all around Bristol to talk to people about what they did want to see downtown.
Yeah.
That was before Renaissance was even a developer. Since then, we've had a public comment session at every meeting that we've had. We've never had one without it. And we've tried to limit the number of executive sessions that we've had. I guess your preference would have been tonight that we not release the report.
No. Oh, well.
It's one or the other. If you're offended by receiving it, then I guess you would have been less offended if you didn't receive it.
Don't put words in my mouth, Mr. Johnson. I'm bothered by the fact that we got the report without an adequate time to read it, study it, and literally analyze it, okay? That's what bothers me. Yes, I went to a lot more meetings than most. I understand. But at that point in time, a lot of things were up in the air. Whatever is tangible is in here. No one could have commented on that because they didn't know that, okay? And you talk about meetings. Have another meeting. You haven't had a meeting in 4 months. Have another meeting. It's not going to take up all your time, and the people will be allowed to participate in a meaningful fashion.
Our next regularly scheduled meeting would be in May.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may, just briefly. I think Mr. Storks makes some good points about the public getting an opportunity to review the report, getting an opportunity to digest the report. I'd just like to note that the BDDC had a legal obligation to keep that report confidential. Oh, let me finish. Before Mr. Monti and the people of Renaissance agreed to release it, I think Mr. Monti and Ryan Porter and his crew should be commended for releasing it as they did in this public forum, so that everybody would have an opportunity to review it, even if it was in a limited period of time. I think the BDDC would probably consider another meeting so that people could have time to digest it. But I think everybody is working together and taking the right steps to try and get the information to the public, and I think that just needed to be said. The BDDC couldn't release it without their consent. They graciously gave their consent today. There is still time to pursue that process, to ask questions, to digest the report, and I think your point is well taken about another meeting may be appropriate so that everybody can have time to come up with those questions.
I understand better than most the confidentiality. Didn't question that, okay? But to try and use the report today, and that's it, I have a problem with that.
Mr.
If there's another, wait, excuse me, let me finish. If
Wait,
there's,
no, please, you spoke more than anyone else. At no point did we say, speak now and that's it. We afforded people an opportunity to look at the report and present their views to this board. At no point in time did we say that there would be no further opportunities.
well, if you would say there would be another meeting, I think more people would be happy and wouldn't comment today. They have another chance.
We're not going to make that commitment at this point, Mr. Wright.
I would just like to say two things. First, as our attorney said, we were asked to keep this report confidential, but the chairlady took the first opportunity she had to make it public, and I think she should be commended for that, because she had a legal obligation to keep it private, and then worked with the developer to make it public so everybody can understand it. And Bill, I think what we're seeing here tonight, because I know I have it, is disappointment and frustration, because we had hoped that last year they would have broke ground and we'd have had the Christmas tree shop and everything else already on their property. But this area may not be the best area for that for a number of reasons. And you're not going to get those kind of developers here in a hurry. And Renaissance is doing the best they can to figure out how we can do what it takes to do it. And as you said, Bill, you need to get people downtown, and that's why there is a heavy emphasis on apartments. I'm disappointed that we didn't move faster. I'm disappointed we don't have buildings up already. But we have to recognize that this is Bristol, Connecticut, and not Greenwich, and things are different here. We have to work with the facts that we have.
I don't think anybody came here tonight with the thought of commenting on this report because it wasn't on the agenda.
I'm not going to debate the issue. It certainly is on the agenda. We're going to move on. Mr. Boyd, do you have any further comments?
Are your questions going to be made public? Any answers? Answers to your questions.
The questions were reprinted in the back of the report. There are extra copies up here for anyone who wants them to take a copy.
I would just like to address Mr. Johnson's remark that there were meetings held before Renaissance was involved to listen to what the people wanted. May I ask you and any member of the board, did one person come and say, we want a housing development there?
Smart growth, transit-oriented
Do you remember one
development.
person saying that?
I remember people mentioning the way Bristol's downtown used to be, which had a lot of retail on the first floor, and it did have
It was all
residential.
retail. Every store I remember downtown Bristol very well.
And there was no residential downtown at all.
No. How many apartments were upstairs? No, they were empty. They were storage. No.
So you didn't really want to ask me a question, you really wanted to make a comment.
No, I'm asking you, but I do remember it because you said you wanted to remember the way the old Bristol was.
I said that that's what was raised by a number of people, from the post office to retail to a variety of other things.
But was any of it a huge housing development of 1,300 or 1,400 units?
No, I don't believe that was mentioned at all.
Thank you.
Ms. I'm going to give you the last comment.
Just with being involved with this at the beginning, I have to tell you, I wasn't quite sure about the whole process with mixed use, because really what I wanted was a lot of retail, okay, shopping. So when they first talked to me about this, I was like, okay, I'm not quite sure. Had some conversations with Ryan. So instead of taking for granted or taking his word, okay, I actually started researching myself. I spent nights on the computer, okay, which my husband would laugh at me because I was researching all over the United States of what was happening in other downtowns. There are cities across the United States that actually have mixed-use development. They have the shops on the bottom. They have apartments on the top. You're looking at people like at Bristol Hospital where I work. People who live out of town want to live here so they don't have to travel. One of the key pieces is having stuff to do so when they go to their apartment where downtown, they can actually walk across and go to Barley Vines, or they can go to a restaurant that's on the piazza and have it outside dining instead of leaving town. We actually approached some businesses. One was a business in Middletown that I went to visit to see if they'd be interested in opening up in downtown Bristol. She had opened up, she's very successful, and she had said that she wasn't quite sure because she wasn't going to open up another space. She had written a whole article in the Harper Current where they featured her. She actually said, please come and look at the development. I told her about what we were doing. She came, she brought her brother, who I believe is either an accountant or an attorney, I can't quite remember. But they set up with a meeting to talk to Ryan. She's actually opening up. She signed a letter of interest. She's opening up a shop in downtown Bristol. This is someone who doesn't live here, but she was excited to see what we were doing. This is somebody who doesn't even live in our town who was like, this is really cool. We're not looking to get low-income people to live here. We're looking at getting the ESPNers, who actually I know that live in Blueback Square and the apartments there, because what? It's cool, because they can walk across the street and go to Grant's, or they can go to Cozy's, or wherever the place is to hang out. Here, they'll live in Bristol, but you got to give them affordable. They're fitting 5 guys in one apartment, so they can afford to live in a place that's cool, because that's what they want to do. You're looking at getting those professionals, okay, that are not necessarily earning the $80,000 a year, but they are earning the 30 or 35 that can live in Bristol. That's what we're looking to do. So let's not write this plan off right off the bat. Let's really look at it and see. Let's have some vision. There's cities out there that are already way ahead of us, and downtowns have already been revitalized. So that's what I'm just asking, is just really look at the whole plan and not just write it off.
Jennifer, could I ask a question? Or is it for my animal?
Mr. Gamache, you didn't sign my form, but in an effort to be polite, but come sign my form.
Thank you, dear. Next time I will do as I'm told.
Go ahead.
I read this as quickly as I could, and what I got out of this so far is that the usual financing methodology, it's said in here, will not work for either phase 1 or even phase 1A. So there is a need to go outside of that, if you will. I don't even know if I should direct this question at, but in here it says you're going to be seeking state funding, and the one that puts up a big red flag for me is federal money. My question is twofold. Are we seeking federal money for this project? And 2, do we understand that once we take federal money, there are so many caveats attached to it that more often than not, you end up spending more money than you get from the federal government in the end. So I'm just wondering, are we seeking federal money or aren't we? And if we are we aware of what comes along with it when we seek out federal funding?
There is no federal funding. We can talk after. I don't think there's any. There is no federal funding.
There is criteria tied to the state funding.
Are we seeking it?
There's discussion about state funding being an option.
State funding
Being an option.
not federal.
No.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Can I just say one thing? Just a sentence. It doesn't matter if we're trying to build affordable housing or low-income housing or not. Once we have transit on the site, there will be an expansion of affordable housing because state law dictates that, and if we take state funding for it, it will be a requirement. Right? I know you know because it's sustainable.
I have reserved comment tonight. There are many things that have been said. Nothing has been directed my way. So if you're asking me a question directly, then I can only answer by saying one thing. We're all entitled to our own opinions. I think that's extremely important that we express them. But what I don't think we're entitled to is our own facts. And what I'm hearing tonight is something that I feel, in fairness to the people in Bristol that have been behind this project for the last 4 years, the 20,000 people that came out 2 years ago at the pop-up piazza that were in favor of seeing economic development take place. I think what we need to do is go back to basics, and basics just means one thing. Numbers either work or they don't. Bristol either wants to see economic development in their community or they don't. If they do, we are not magicians. We will do our best to come to you with a plan. It will either be accepted or rejected. But what I can say is that if you're interested in your city, I would love to engage with you and show you examples all over the country where this type of economic development has been successful. And I would look to respond to you and give you the same courtesy of you showing me areas in the country that you think have done this without the type of development that we're talking about. Maybe I can learn something.
Well, are you saying that there's smart growth without subsidies anywhere?
I'm just saying I'd be happy to talk to you about things that are happening around the country that are good examples of responsible economic development.
Done.
Okay.
I was only asked one question.
I'm sorry.
I shut up all.
I'm sorry.
There is an item on the public agenda for a report from Renaissance. Do you have a report for the public portion of this meeting, or no?
I think we'll reserve that for our discussions.
Other than the fact that we're pleased to have submitted the package for review and discussion, we would be pleased to come back here at your request. And we're also very much looking forward to something that I have not been a part of for quite some time, and that is a larger community meeting with the Bristol Rising folks, and you know, make it as many questions, as many comments, as many discussions as possible. And what I'm saying is I think it's long overdue, certainly on our part.
The last remaining item on the agenda is the executive session, and we can tell you all how this is going to work. I'll take a motion for the board to go into executive session. The board is going to want 15 minutes among ourselves before we invite you all in. Is anybody here from the city attorney's office? Oh, you're in the back. I didn't see you. Okay, with that, I will take a motion to convene into executive session. There won't be... Yes. There won't, just for the public's purpose, there will not be any votes taken in the executive session, so you don't need to worry about that. We'll be going into executive session to discuss confidential portions exempt from disclosure pursuant to the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act, General Statute Section 1-210B5A and 1-210B5B. We're going to ask that this confidential portion be held in confidence by everyone that attends the executive session. With that, I will take a motion to convene an executive session and also to invite
Jennifer,
representatives from the city attorney's office.
Is there a confidential portion anymore to talk about?
It's negotiations.
That's not what you just said.
Is there any reason for the public to stay?
We won't be taking any votes in executive session.
And you won't be talking afterwards?
We will not be taking any votes in executive session.
Will you be talking afterwards?
No.
So, when you get out of executive session, you're gone.
We're gone.
So we don't have to stay.
Try to get out of here.
Hey, don't just sit around and say goodbye.
Yes, there's budget.
Dave.
I'm getting the statutory.
Thank you.
You have to reconvene and have a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, that's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm having people go to the gym, to be honest.
1200 sub 6.
There's not.
He's got-
There's not one transit-oriented development site in the state that doesn't have low-income housing, not one.
So I'll amend my notation to 1-210B, 1-200, excuse me, 6.
I know, I'm blaming you, but here you go.
I know you just had it in the, D, 6 capital D. That, can I have